On most world maps, if you can even find it, Nauru appears as nothing more than a tiny dot in the vast Pacific Ocean. Zoom out, and it disappears completely. Zoom in, and you might think it's a typo. The entire country is only 21 square kilometers, smaller than most airports. Yet, in the 1970s, this microscopic island became one of the richest countries on Earth. At one point, the average Nauruan was wealthier than the average American. How? Bird droppings. I'm serious. This is the story of how millions of years of accumulated seabird feces made a tiny island nation fabulously wealthy, and then destroyed it completely. Let's start with the geography. Nauru is a coral island in the central Pacific, about 25 miles south of the equator. For thousands of years, it was home to Micronesian people who lived off fishing and agriculture. Then, in 1900, a geologist named Albert Fuller Ellis noticed something unusual about the rocks lying around. They were phosphate, high-grade phosphate. Phosphate is one of the most important ingredients in fertilizer. Without it, modern agriculture cannot produce food efficiently. In the early 20th century, phosphate was essentially solid gold. How did it get there? Over millions of years, countless seabirds used Nauru as a nesting ground. Layer after layer after layer of bird droppings accumulated. Over time, the waste hardened and mixed with coral calcium, creating one of the richest phosphate deposits in the world. Nauru was, quite literally, an island built on ancient bird poop. Mining started in 1906 under German colonial rule, then continued under Australian, New Zealand, and British control. For decades, foreign companies extracted the phosphate. The Nauruans? They got very little. But in 1968, Nauru gained independence and took control of its own resources. The newly established Nauru Phosphate Corporation began exporting phosphate, and the money started pouring in. By 1975, Nauru had a per capita GDP of $50,000, second only to Saudi Arabia. In today's money, that's roughly equivalent to $260,000 per person. So what did the government do with all this money? Everything. No income tax, free health care, free education, including sending students abroad to study, massive welfare payments. They invested in global real estate, luxury hotels in Melbourne, office buildings in Honolulu. They even bought a Boeing 737 for Air Nauru, the national airline of a country you could walk across in under an hour. Nauruans drove sports cars. They imported luxury goods. Some families owned multiple houses. For a brief moment in history, the citizens of this tiny dot in the Pacific were living like oil princes. It looked like paradise. But there was a problem, a very big problem. To extract phosphate, mining companies had to dig deep into the land. By the 1980s, over 80% of Nauru's land area had been strip mined. The interior of the island, once covered in lush tropical forest, was turned into a wasteland of jagged limestone pinnacles. Imagine your entire country being reduced to a moonscape. That's what happened. The remaining population was confined to a narrow strip of habitable land along the coast. Agriculture became impossible. The soil was gone. Nauru became entirely dependent on imported food. And here's the kicker. The phosphate was running out. By the 1990s, the impossible happened. The island that had been one of the wealthiest nations on Earth went bankrupt. The overseas investments failed spectacularly. One particularly infamous example: the government invested millions in a London musical called Leonardo the Musical, A Portrait of Love. It flopped completely. The Nauru Phosphate Royalties Trust, set up to manage the nation's wealth for future generations, plummeted from $1.3 billion in 1990 to just $138 million by 2002. Unemployment hit 90%. Nauru was broke. So what do you do when you're a tiny island nation with no resources and a destroyed landscape? You get creative. In the late 19s, Nauru became a tax haven and offshore banking center. They sold passports to foreigners for a fee. Then, in 2001, Australia made an offer. We'll pay you to host an immigration detention center for asylum seekers. Nauru, desperate for income, agreed. The facility has been criticized for overcrowding, poor sanitation, and human rights abuses. But for Nauru, it became a critical source of revenue. The island that once lived off bird droppings now survives partly by housing asylum seekers. Today, Nauru is slowly trying to recover, but the statistics don't tell the whole story. Nauru has one of the highest obesity rates in the world, over 60% of the population, due to reliance on imported processed foods. This is what economists call the resource curse. It's what happens when a country becomes dependent on a single finite resource and fails to plan for what comes after. Nauru's story is the most extreme example of boom and bust in modern history. From the richest country on earth to economic collapse in less than 30 years, all because of bird poop. And here's the truly unsettling part. Nauru isn't alone. Right now, countries around the world are extracting oil, minerals, and rare earth metals at unsustainable rates. The question isn't if those resources will run out. It's when. And whether those countries will be ready when they do. Nauru wasn't.